Hebrews chapter 8, starting in verse 1. Now, the point in what we are saying is this, and again, I mentioned that this is really nice that the writer gives us the point that he's trying to focus on. And this gives us the context of the whole chapter itself, indeed the context of the unit that we're studying, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which began in earnest way back in chapter 5 with mentioning Melchizedek as a type and shadow of Yeshua, our heavenly high priest, but specifically the point that we need to focus on, which is Jesus' mediatorial work as a high priest as contrasted to the Levitical priesthood here on earth. The point that we're trying to say is this: we have such a high priest, one who's seated at the right hand of the throne and the majesty of heaven. Right. In other words, the contrast is between the earthly high priests, which are good, which are right in front of us, and contrasted to the heavenly high priest who's seated right next to God himself. Yeshua is a minister in the holy places in the true tent as contrasted to the shadowy tent or the copy tent, as we're going to read about down in verse 5. It's not the true tent in contrast to the false tent that we read in verse 2. Minister of the true tent, right, the skenes tes alethenes that we read about right here in the Greek. It's not that this earthly tent was bad and that the writer wants us to turn away from that thing so that we can see the good. In fact, he says the true tent so that we can understand that the earthly is actually the shadow tent or the copy tent or the temporary tent. Or the good tent, right? So use that contrast in your mind. Shadow versus true, or copy versus true, or good versus better, something like that. And we're going to see this when I get down to verse 5. Verse 3, for every high priest is in verse 2, there's a contrast between the tent that's set up, that the Lord set up, not man set up. So there's another contrast. It's good that man set up the tent, right? God instructed Moses and the people of Israel back in Leviticus and Exodus particularly to build this thing, right? That's a good thing. And so to have man set up a tent is a good thing, but to have the Lord set up a tent is a better thing. So we can see that there's an immediate contrast for us in verse 2. In verse 3, he says, every high priest is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices, thus it's necessary for this priest to also have something to offer. The role of a priest is to minister to the people. And so a priest is not just there for himself. The role of a priest that the writer is trying to get us to understand is to be there as a buffer and a go-between between God and the people. The priest was hired to do a job, and therefore he is appointed to offer gifts. And so because this is the function of a priest, then Yeshua, if he's going to be qualified as a priest, he must also have something to offer, right? And he's going to offer that in the heavenly tent.